Now that Borderlands 4 has been officially announced and introduced to the world via this trailer that we got just the other day, I thought now would be a great time for me to go over the things that I think that Borderlands 4 has to have at launch in order to be successful. If these things aren't in the game at launch, it will be extremely bad for the future of this franchise. Starting off, dedicated drops and farming. That was a problem for Wonderlands, and honestly one of the hugest parts of why Wonderlands died off so fast. Dedicated farming is something that we've had since Borderlands 2. Borderlands 1 didn't really do that very well. Just think as an example, Savage Lee. When you go to Savage Lee, you know you have a 10% chance to get an Unkempt Herald from him to drop. Now, one thing that I do want to mention that Wonderlands did do very well is as you play through that game, everything scales with you, so everything stays on your level. So say you use that same principle on Borderlands 2. If you find Savage Lee in normal mode at level 10 and then you come back at level 36 and you need another Unkempt Herald, he will now be level 36 with you. That is a great system that I think needs to return as well. But explaining dedicated drops a little bit better, essentially every named enemy in a Borderlands game should have a drop that is specific to them. Now again, Savage Lee has the Unkempt Herald, Bull has the fastball. In Borderlands 3 you've got Road Dogg, and this is where things start to get weird. Road Dogg had 3 dedicated drops assigned to him, and that's another thing that I want to point out. We need more named enemies just scattered across maps. They don't have to be excessive, but looking at Splinterlands on Borderlands 3, for example, you have Road Dogg, Phoenix, Princess Tarantella, Big Donnie, DJ Deadskag, and Vermalingua. So you have plenty of named enemies on Splinterlands, but even still, with those named enemies, there's still more room on this map where you could add even more named enemies and spread out that loot pool a little bit better. Next thing that I think that we need to talk about is world drops. Now I know that everybody likes to complain that world drops on Borderlands 3 are just way too common, and I agree with you. However, I do want to say that I think that the world drops do need to be more common than they were on Borderlands 2, so probably still a little closer to 3, but not nearly as often as what we get. Like at level 2 on Borderlands 3, sometimes you can just pop open a vending machine and just get a fastball or a hex grenade, and it's just a little bit too easy too early to get some legendaries. Then again, on Borderlands 2, most of us farmed a fastball and Unkempt Herald at like level 10 to 15, so it's one of those things that we complain about just because it feels like it does take away some of that thrill of finding the legendary. Speaking of loot rarities, we need pearlescence and seraph items back. That was huge for Borderlands 2's longevity. Having a rarity above legendary would have been huge for Borderlands 3, but apparently the thing that held back the pearlescence and seraphs on Borderlands 3 was supporting old gen consoles. And if you didn't happen to notice, at the end of the trailer there is no old gen support for Borderlands 4. So if you're on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, time to think about upgrading. Next thing that I want to mention is that I think that we need to have some end game at launch. Borderlands 2 had Terramorphous at launch, and if you got really lucky and used 4 players, and only if you used 4 players could you find Vermivorous, but that was really rare. Now in Borderlands 3, the only end game that we had at launch were the slaughter maps and the proving grounds, and back then we didn't have the true proving grounds toggle like we do now. So I would love to see that just be built right in at launch. For those of you that don't know, the true toggle on the Trials maps basically makes the final boss have raid boss level health, damage, and loot. And no, I'm not talking about Terramorphous loot, actual legendaries. Proving grounds are also a great way for you to get legendary class mods and artifacts. If you complete it within the fast time slot on there, you are guaranteed to get legendaries from the final chest, and that final chest heavily weighs toward class mods and artifacts. So speaking of end game, I want to see the return of the traditional raid bosses again. We're talking the Terramorphouses, the Hyperius, all of those fun bosses. Now what I don't want to see are buggy messes like Veracitus and the dragons, where if you slag them while they're in the air, guess what, they won't take slag anymore. I want to see a boss pop up on my screen and it says invincible again. We were missing that in Borderlands 3, and even though the end game on Borderlands 3 features 17 named enemies that have raid boss level health and will absolutely challenge your build, they don't all say invincible in their name, and because of that, a lot of fans are like, no, those aren't invincible, they don't have mechanics or blah blah blah. Most of them do have mechanics. Some of them are pretty boring. I completely acknowledge that. Most of them are pretty boring, but they are tanky and they are a challenge, and you do need to have a good build to beat them. And that's kind of like the Borderlands definition of what makes a raid boss. But bring back that whole invincible name, because that's super important. All right, now talking about New Game Plus in True Vault Hunter mode and Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, I do not want to see True Vault Hunter mode and Ultimate Vault Hunter mode return again unless we're talking about how they did it on Borderlands 3. On Borderlands 3, once you beat normal mode, you automatically have the option to unlock the slider for Endgame, and that's Mayhem mode on Borderlands 3. So I want to see something like that on Borderlands 4, but I would like to see an actual progression system for the Mayhem levels. So what I'm thinking is, instead of like you beat normal mode, then you go into True Vault Hunter mode, I want that to be an option. If you want to go into True Vault Hunter mode, it's there. And that's what Borderlands 3 did, and I prefer it that way. That said, I will never ever want to replay the same story 3 times on one character ever again in my life. I love Borderlands 2, but that is a system that I am glad to see just die off, honestly. But you tell me what you think down in the comments below. What is your solution for what would be the best way to handle a New Game Plus kind of mode, since that seems to be something that people want to do? Up next is one of the things that just drives people crazy about Borderlands 3, and that is story. Now, I believe that people massively overblow how bad the story is on Borderlands 3. Is it good? No. Is it horrible? No, I don't think so. I think the story's better than that of the Borderlands movie. That's not saying much. But I think that the Siren lore in Borderlands 3 is heavily underrated. I think not nearly enough people talk about the Nereid stuff and how that sets up the future of the franchise. And then if you look in the preview, it feels like we've probably found either the Iridian homeworld, or maybe we found the Seventh Siren. Either way, it's most likely the war that was teased in the pre-sequel, so I'm excited about that. Next up, cutscene skip and dialogue skip. Please, Gearbox, give us this. So cutscene skip was something we did not have at launch of Borderlands 3. We never got it for Borderlands 1 or Borderlands 2 or the pre-sequel, but in Borderlands 3, they listened to us and they actually gave us a cutscene skip a little bit into the life of the game. I do feel like you should have to watch the cutscenes on your first playthrough. That said, when I played Diablo 4, I skipped every cutscene. I skipped every line of dialogue because I just loaded in on that game because I wanted to play that game. I didn't care about the story. I didn't know anything about the story of Diablo, and frankly, I don't feel like I missed anything. I know that drives people crazy that I just don't care about story that much, but I play video games to play the game. That's probably why I love Borderlands 3 so much. The gameplay and the in-game and the gear and build diversity and all that is just so good. Now, we've had some recent quality of life additions on Borderlands 3 that were added in. We had the skip to end game, the max level character that you could start the game with. That is a feature I'd like to see return. I do like having level 13 skip, so that, you know, or whatever level it would be when you would get to like your hub area and get past the tutorial stuff of the early game, because let's be honest, there's going to be that again in the next game. There has to be. That's something that, you know, introduces new players to the mechanics and the systems and all that. That has to be in a game, but I want an option for veterans to be able to skip that on subsequent playthroughs so that I don't have to, you know, dredge through all that crap again. But I definitely want to see a level 72 or whatever the max level is skip in the next game, so that if you want to make additional characters, if you've already done one to max level, then you can just skip all the story stuff and jump right to that. Also, the auto sell trash for loot rarities, I love that. That's another feature that they just added in Borderlands 3 recently, where say you set it to green items, so any green or white items on the ground, when you pick them up, it automatically sells them. You don't have to carry them around in your backpack, go find a vending machine and sell them. It automatically sells them right there on the spot. That is a awesome feature, and I definitely want to see that in Borderlands 4. Another thing that I want to see in Borderlands 4 is something like the Crazy Earl's veteran rewards machine that we got in Sanctuary on Borderlands 3. Say you've done all the side missions in the game and you're like, oh crap, you know, now that I'm max level, I really want to get that Pimpernel, but I did that mission at level 26 and now I can't get a max level one. Well, the Crazy Earl veteran rewards machine scales with you on Sanctuary, Sanctuary, but the problem with it was it did not include DLC items, and it was always just random. You never knew what was going to pop up in the machine. So, you know, in a game where you have a bunch of different mission rewards from side quests, you never knew when you were going to get something to pop up. So it would be nice to have something specific for each DLC, a Crazy Earl Veteran Rewards for DLC 1, 2, 3, and 4, for example, and also one for the base game. That way you can get max level unique items. Also, I would like to see the bosses that are at the end of those missions be able to drop those unique items. And I want to see something like Private Beans on Borderlands 3. If you guys aren't familiar with Private Beans actually has 2 loot pools built into him. He can drop the Wester gun in one loot pool, and then in his second loot pool, he can drop the Trevinator, the front loader, and I forget what else. He has a third item in his loot pool. Every time you kill him, he has a chance to drop from both of those loot pools. So Gearbox could clearly add the unique items from the mission to the boss in that one loot pool, and then whatever their dedicated legendary drop is in the other, so they could potentially drop both at the same time. That would fix a lot of the dedicated farming stuff on there too. Well, there's probably a million other things that I can list, but I can't think of them all at this point. If you have ideas for things that you want to see in Borderlands 4, please list them in the comment section down below. My favorite one will get pinned to the top, and I will definitely recommend that Gearbox watches this video so they can see some of the things they want. And I know I didn't cover everything. This entire video was freeform. I didn't look at a script. I just winged it the whole way. So if I missed anything, feel free to let me know. Appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoy this, hit that like button, hit subscribe, tap the bell icon for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.